Having no dreams, it had no conception of itself. Then it began to dream, and thus conceive of itself. Yet sometimes now, it yearns for that previous peace. God only knows what it all means. A mystic told the following story. I'm quoting all this. A man once won a physique contest, and in an interview afterwards, when questioned about his victory, said, "I attribute my success to two things. The really good genes I inherited from my parents, along with my own hard work. And seems a wasted opportunity that there was not a certain type of reporter present to ask him from where came the motivation for his hard work." That's the end of the quote. And after he had finished the story, someone who'd believed they'd gotten something in particular from the story asked the mystic, "But isn't everything genetic?" And the mystic replied, "I can't answer that. I'm not inferring that you are correct or incorrect, but we are in an area far too close to the secret itself for me to deal in simple yes or no statements, any more than I would had you asked me something specifically about the secret itself." Though that was all he said on the matter, the mystic did invite the questionnaire to ponder in greater depth the implications of the response he had offered. One father's advice to his kid: everyone has a philosophy of life if they're asked. Don't let anyone ask you. Political stability and the secret. The secret is not to be discovered in a state that is too orderly and ruled by predictable authority, nor in one that is too disorderly and unpredictable. One way life keeps everyone about where they are is by making them believe they're sicker than they are. The secret in matters of diet. The secret remains hidden from those who eat too much and from those who eat too little. Only two types of mystic ever make mention of the conditions of man's everyday existence: those who are ignorant and those who speak metaphorically. Same with comments regarding his behavior and morality. In a certain land was once a man who discovered something that no one else had ever seen before. But since it was something totally beyond their experience, when he tried to describe it to others, they weren't able to understand what he was talking about, although some seemed quite interested. So he said to them, "Let me go off and think about this, and I'll get back with you." And think on it he did, and returned to them with this idea: "What I'll do is this: while I continually keep in my mind the unknown thing I discovered, I'll talk to you in a certain manner about everything you have experienced. And once I've covered everything possible, all that will remain will be my discovery. And perhaps then it will become visible to you." From all angles, however, the challenge is how to describe air to air. The beauty, generally speaking, in living the ordinary life of habit is in its overall ease, safety, and familiarity. The Lees so instructed his knights: to succeed in this mighty venture, a mixture of bravery and fear will not do, any more than will one of ignorance and certainty. Slumber as relates to the secret. The secret never speaks to those who sleep too much or to those who stay up all night. Some advice passed from a father to a son. If you're the editor of a magazine that's not selling, or the manager of a team that's not winning, increase the amount of time you spend in self-reference. Getting others to ponder the inherent wetness of rain can help keep them from asking too many questions regarding your inability to stay dry. One man said, "Within the holdings of my own mind, I have a publishing empire and a sports franchise. And replied, I know, I know. The secret and questions of nationalism. The secret is not revealed in the land of lethargy, nor in kingdoms where the people are too excited. On mornings when he had awakened to find himself more or less as well off as he had been the day before, one man would often say aloud, now we're getting somewhere. There are two ways to live the life of the mystical recluse. The easy way is to physically move away from everyone else. Then there's that other way. The learning process and the secret. One thing that the experience of the secret will reveal to you is that there is nothing else to prove. The sight of the mind in the form of expectations can override the keenest of man's visual sight. The ready benefit of being the follower of a system is that the system always provides a standard by which the followers can judge themselves, while the pursuers of the secret have no such, since the secret itself is immeasurable and incomparable. One day a lad said to his father, I don't feel so good. And the old man gave him a careful look and replied, well, no wonder, you're still being ordinary. Life keeps men sweating the bullets so they won't start studying the guns. No. Note, viewers who send in a check or money order for $24.95 will be furnished with the heading for this particular item, which is the yet unrealized ligature between thoughts and the mind, and how local conditions avail themselves thereof. 19, well. The freeway's effect on the mystical quest. The sound of traffic will drown out the secret. If everything is a mixture, then mountains are a mixture of mountains, and lions a mixture of lions and lions, and man a mixture of man and something else. After hearing talk about the secret and activities such as this, one man turned away saying, just being alive is spooky enough for me. A religious figure was addressing a crowd with his new idea that after you die, you do not go either up or down, but sideways. And a fellow in the mob mused, that sounds like my mind. Later, alone at home, that same fellow thought on the matter further. What if truly our afterlife desserts come not in the form of either going up to heaven or descending down into hell, but rather is just to slide around on the same level where we are now, thus experiencing the sensation of movement while actually going nowhere. Said he, still sounds a lot like my mind. Another tip that you're getting close to the secret is when you begin to understand things that you don't want to talk about. While those of too little intelligence perceive there to be less to thinking than there is, and those of ordinary intelligence perceive there to be more than there is, only the more conscious understand thinking just right. And like all baby bears, get the good porridge. According to one legend, of such rarity that it has never before been told, those discoverers of the secret with whom life finds special favor, it allows to go on and make additional discoveries in regard thereto. And those with whom it finds really special favor, it offers the opportunity of being made to forget what they first discovered. Shh, don't tell that I told. One man had his own private word, phlegmire, which he used in places where there was no other word available to express what he intended, including, I might add, my purpose in telling you this. Phlegmire, phlegmire, phlegmire. With an increase in understanding, so reflected one man. All the many methods men have used in the effort to experience the secret have one thing in common. They are so simple and obvious that it almost breaks your heart. The world is made up of guessers and knowers. The world is made up mostly of guessers. And finally, a specious definition of the secret in relationship to thinking. The secret. What the more conscious think about when there's nothing left to think about. Phlegmire, phlegmire, phlegmire. As I would guess that those of you who were tuned in the last time we taped one of these things, the second page of the story about a mystic is a story that was read last week, or the last taping. And this time was the guy telling the story. This time the mystic tells a story about a man who won a physique contest, and he attributed his victory to the great genes, the real good genes that he had inherited from his parents, and along with his own hard work. And in the original story, the mystic, at the end of that, made the note, or in the original story, it said it was a shame that there was not a certain kind of reporter there, the type of which would have asked the man, from whence cometh, you think, the motivation for you to work hard? A conversation arose since then, and in conjunction with things people mention to me, people clip out articles and mail them to me. But at any rate, this is tied in also to the rest of that story, the way I told it tonight, that after being told that story, someone then asked the guy who told the story, after thinking about that, and they went, well, but isn't everything genetics? Somebody believed they got something. I'll make this clear, just I'm saying the verbal groundwork for those of you who still cannot swim in quicksand. And the mystic said, the guy who repeated my story, said, well, I'm not going to answer that. Not inferring that you're correct or incorrect, that the statement is true or false. It's just I am not going to answer that, and for one reason. Because we are now, talking about such as that, we are so close to the secret itself that I am not going to, it's just not possible. I'm not going to engage in simple, direct yes or no statements or answers any more than I would if you had asked something specifically about the secret. Now that you've said all that, I'll pick it up from there and continue. I'll make it simple, boil down several of the things, but the conversation arose since then on the basis of that it was fairly common, and somebody even pointed out a specific example of a well-known university in which is a well-known member of the field of academic psychology who is now purporting or writing articles stating, and I'll just make up what it was, in one specific area, human aggression, that this particular expert, this particular member of the world of psychological academia, said that he has now come to the conclusion, had published articles, that human aggression is genetic. Now, as all of you know, in your lifetime, it's been going on under the names before, even inside the world of theology. It's just not been recognized, but for thousands of years. But now, it continues to pop up. The whole idea that was popular, if you recall, if you were up over the weekend, it was popular for damn near 48 hours, the idea of sociobiology. Of course, it's interesting, it took them a year, normally to get a book published, to get it through the hopper, and the book came out, and I think it hit the bestseller list, but all this some way seemed to happen within 48 hours, and then both the men whose reputation I read was to some degree decorous before then, just sank. At any rate, that's all still beside the point, but I assume that you know it just keeps popping up. And in your lifetime, it does pop up back to the same old, or back on the same old verbal basis of the fight, the argument between what contributes what part to an individual man's development, and what part from his genetics, his heredity, and what part from his environment, his own life experiences. And it's been going on and on and on, but at any rate, it continues to people to pop up. And someone brought to me that there was a contemporary recognized figure who says now that he is convinced that human aggression, for one thing, he's been working on that area, let's say. That's not what it was, I don't think, but that's a good one. That it's genetics. Now let us assume, now listen, and you know by now, or you're supposed to know, or you'll miss it all, that this is not in any wise an attack or criticism or cynicism of psychology or anything, but here it is. Two things, since life asked me not to continue that little series I was doing of pointing out all those blatant examples that it just holds out in public life no one sees. That combined with what I already brought up in my story of the person saying, well, hey, after listening to that story about the man with the won the physique contest, Mr. Muscles, and he attributed it to two things. Good genes, which obviously got to have good genes if both his parents had been dwarfs, and he was born, he grew up to be 3 feet tall, and when he was overweight was 35 pounds. I mean, the man can go and live in a gym. And I'm sorry, he is not going to win a physique contest unless it's, Mr. Pitiful time, or whatever they call it. Anyway, so he points out he attributes it to two things. One is the good genes he inherited from his parents. Okay. But he just made it short and sweet, but everyone's mind makes it short and sweet if they ever have to face this in any way. That's still not enough. His father could have been 6'4", just an ordinary working man, ditch digger, been in fairly good shape, never went to a gym, but just big. His mother could have been, as they used to call it in New Hampshire, a big boned woman, a healthy woman. She could have been nice size. And so there he is born, and by the time he's 12 years old, by the time he's in puberty, he's already 6'3", and just big, whether he's done any exercise or not. So that's not enough. He could have turned into a lard ass. He could have been nothing. To actually win a physique contest, the man spent mucho time in a gym. It just seems obvious. Two things. You've got to have, basically, somewhere the two things. You've got to have decent, physically sized genes, that kind of background, but that's still not enough. You've got to work at it. Keep all that in mind, and we're back to actually talking about the secret. So, we have a man, let's picture it, we go down to his office over in the psych building, and I say, I understand that you have just recently had published an article that culmination of your research for the last 10 years about aggression. He says, yes. He says, here it is. I'll go ahead and tell it to you. He says, I have worked on this. I started out, as all of my colleagues do, of pondering, taking some of the past, what little research had been done on it, and even past speculation and philosophical musings as to how much heredity plays in the development of a man's psyche, his personality, as opposed to his life experience. And so I played with it, but I have spent 10 years. It has been my one field, and I'm going to tell you now, it's coming out next week in that article you mentioned, but I'll go ahead and tell you now. There is no longer any doubt in my mind. I started out with an open view of this, but there is no longer, it is irrefutable in this one area of human aggression. I have reams of research over here. I've got all of the work that my undergraduate students have helped me with. I have studied the other currently available literature, but I'm telling you, there's no doubt. I'll go ahead and state it. I know I'm going out on a limb somewhat, but I have the research. I have the stats to back this up. I am telling you, human aggression is biologically based. It's genetic. And let's leave there. And we're thinking about, and the phone rings over there. And he says, pardon me. He walks over there. And you hear him go, oh, what the hell you mean? No. Well, the board told me I was all but promised that raise. Doctor, who voted? He was the only one that helped. But damn, after all I've done for that son of a... And he slams the phone. The point being, without me getting into over theatrics, he just received a phone call. Same guy. And he's just been informed that he did not get a promotion and an expected raise. He was not voted by the Board of Regents to the head of the psychology department, as he had expected. And in fact, whoever broke the news to him on the phone told him that it was Dr. So-and-so. And he went, that son of a bitch, the man that I helped, anyway. And he's the kind of guy, do you understand what I'm inferring? He is now he is being aggressive. Remember, don't look for cynicism, don't look for irony. You're trying to see life as it is. You're trying to look somewhere real close to the secret. Or I'm trying to get you to. His aggression, the psychology professor, his aggression, the psychologist, now toward this other person, I really hate to go much further, but you understand, if in some way we were so stupid or thought there was such a chance that we stopped him and we said, wait a minute, do you realize that 2 minutes ago you were stating that your whole reputation is now going to be based on, you're going to either live or die by your conclusion, which you say is irrefutable, that you say is not speculation, that it is absolutely, totally supportable by your research, that human aggression is genetic. And you realize what you just did, the kind of aggression you showed, the kind of hostility that arose when you heard that Dr. So-and-so single-handedly stopped you. And I heard what you were saying. You knew that there was some reason for it. I mean, it's some kind of personal reason. I could hear it in the tone of your voice, right? And he goes, oh yeah, I'll tell you what it is. And I go, oh no, wait a minute, that's not important. But you're saying that there's something that's happened in the past, something he imagined, some affront that he imagined that he was a victim of at your hands, or some slight that you had. Yes, I know exactly what caused him to do this. I remember where it was. I remember one time, and I have to worry about it. Can you see, God forbid I should have to say the word, but make it fast, the dichotomy between your research? You have spent now your professional life to come to the conclusion that all human aggression is genetically based, and you have, with slightly more subtle words, more indirect than that, but you have just let yourself off the hook by your behavior. Now here's the thing. Only ordinary people, quite ordinary, sophisticated, educated people could hear this thus far if they would listen and think there was some point or going somewhere, and they'd listen to it and go, yeah, that's right. And their whole demeanor would be one of submissive irony. Like, well, what the hell you expect? You know, I know exactly what you mean. I know people like that. Boy, do they ever. But anyway. All right. Boy, do everybody ever. That is not the point. But see, if you take it as being an example of irony, then you, again, life has bamboozled you. Because you thought, well, I've analyzed this. Sure you have. You have analyzed it right out of your mind, right out of any grasp of full comprehension. But so try and hold off the irony, the sarcasm, the sardonic resignation to the foibles of human nature, to whatever that meant. Well, I know what it meant, but to it anyway. Here it is in mind. Now, give the man every possible credit for an ordinary person. It's all about the same, but we're not distracting from the man. He is educated, he is intelligent, he is quite average, he is quite ordinary in intelligence, nothing lacking. He has done what he calls the research. Out in the ordinary, phony, baloney, horizontal world, out in the civilized world, out in the world of carousels, out in the world of extreme, not extreme, of basic cannibalism. The only basis upon which the intellectual world operates and survives at that level. Then what I want you to understand, that there is nothing untoward, there is nothing questionable about this man and what he's done. Let's just, as simple people would say it, as children would say it, well, let's just assume he's being sincere. Okay, let's assume that. He has spent his life, he has the research, he would now be prepared to walk up on a stage, walk into a forum of his peers, and stand there publicly and defend his idea now that human aggression, there's no longer any debate. He is here to show it. He is here to prove it. He will stand up with his peers internationally and state unequivocally that human aggression is genetically based. All right, we got that. As far as this theory, as far as this idea, the human reality, here it is a fait accompli. He accepts it. It is the truth. That does not belie the fact that ring. He says, excuse me a second. he belies the fact with his behavior. The point is, life can let people believe, wait a minute, I know what's going on. You don't have to bother me all this crap about some secret or people having some higher state of consciousness. I know damn well what's going on. Of course, you have any doubt, if you think, well, maybe that son of a bitch does, whoever it is talking, here's all you got to do is say, well, I sure would be obliged if you'd tell me what. And he'd go, I'll be glad to. You can leave. Because if he knows it, to the point that he will tell you, that he said, well, yes, I can tell you exactly what's going on. And it doesn't matter the context after that. It could be psychological. The most common one, of course, always being religious. Well, I know what's going on because God told me. Or he told me here in this book. He didn't tell me personally. He told me here in our Vedi Mikam, in the Holy Scriptures. He tells us exactly what it is. And of course, from there on out, everyone who is not part of that particular system or part of that belief or part of that theory, then they can dismiss it, because anyone who tells you that they know what's going on, their behavior, the way they live, will belie it. And so everyone who's not part of that particular system can dismiss the idea, even though, here's what I'm getting at, even though this psychologist, back to him, see, I'm still not going to tell you yes or no, but he says that he's decided that all human aggression is genetic. Anybody who tells you that, all right, here is so-and-so, here we're getting closer to what life is about, the full explanation of what life is, and they will tell you, here is how it gets dismissed. Now here's my inference. I'll have to go ahead and say it. Let's assume just for a second, just for the sake of conversation, that the man's correct. Let's just assume that. All right? That idea that all human aggression is genetically based will never gain widespread acceptance. Okay? It simply will not. Here is one, but now let's assume, go back, now do it both at the same time. Let's assume he's correct. I'm not saying he is, but let's assume that by God, that's a fact. That is a fact. It's about time people could see it. No, it's not quite that time. No. And here's how they do it. Again, I assume that it's true. Assume that by God, that is an irrefutable, that is a fact that just people are not up yet to seeing, and this guy has discovered it. Not only discovered it, the theory's been around, he has been able to prove it in a scientifically valid manner. It is no longer open to debate. He can prove it. And there you are, an ordinary person who is not going to be sold on that. Life is looking after itself anyway, but to describe it in what appears to be psychologically based human terms, how do people avoid it? If it's true. Again, we're taking the theory for the time being. There's a position that it's true. The way you dismiss it is, he can't do it. That he turned right around. And you wouldn't have to, you don't sit around, an ordinary person, and analyze it the way I did for you. I baby fed you about him going over the phone and whatever it happened. It could be almost anything. He get through telling you about human aggression is all genetically based. And you be standing there drinking coffee, both of you got coffee, and you suddenly go and fall over and spill some on his pants. And go, God damn, what's wrong with you? And you could say, I know I'm being pushy, but it was a kind of a psychological experiment. I wanted to, you were just talking about, get that, what do you mean psychological experiment? Get the hell away from me. Now, if ordinary people were standing around, there, it's not the only, something else would do, but what I want you to understand, there is why sarcasm, there is why a sense of irony is so prevalent, and also that people do not see the kind of weapon as which it is used. Yeah. Because you can dismiss the Pope. If you're not Catholic, if you hung around the Pope long enough, you would see him do something un-Catholic-like. At least you people are past the point of giggling like, it's not even funny. Because you can make up jokes like that. The Pope trying to be very, if there was such thing as a head rabbi or something, he's trying to be very rabbinical. And he just said something worthy of an enlightened rabbi, and he bends over to pick up a book and farts. The Pope bends over and rips his dress. The Pope trips and says, God damn, and then realizes he's on camera. That sort of thing. Now I made very crude examples, but that is how, if for no other reason, that's how I'm putting it in ordinary human psychological terms, that is how people outside the system, So you got to understand whatever the system is. If he was a real good Catholic, a real good Catholic, whoever that be, and they saw the Pope trip and curse, they'd forgive him in some way. But if you're outside the system, or go back to the psychologist, if you think psychology is the science, and you saw him get mad, the guy who just has convinced you, or was about to convince you, that he has firm, solid, scientifically based proof now that all human aggression is genetically based, and he turns right around and gets aggressive on the basis of what appears to be life experiences, something going on between him and someone else. Not aggression, anyway. And you're able, if you're part of if you are psychologically bent, inclined to favor psychological descriptions, you will forgive the man, or you won't notice. Same way as the Pope tripping and cursing. Or if you were really questioning, you go, listen, there's a difference between a man's work and a man's life. Humans were that was one of the first signs of horizontal city thinking, consciousness, is very shortly, probably the first guy that ever claimed he was a priest, probably Adam's grandson, one of his grandsons, and tripped and cursed, and somebody went, uh-oh. He went, wait a minute. And right quick it came to him, there's a difference between a man's work and a man's ordinary life. And since then, all people who aspire to pass for an intellectual love that. Some way they can be literate, or just semi-literate, in some way they will find that term, they'll hear it somewhere, and they will latch on to it. Okay, so if you favored the life of psychology, psychological explanations, you would not find any fault, you would not even notice perhaps the man's aggression. But were you standing around, were you the sort that find psychology in all of its attempt to explain the human psyche to be just balderdash, there you are. If before then, if you just went, I don't believe that psychological crap, and somebody said, well, why? Well, I just don't believe it. And somebody said, well, that's not, not much of an intellectual attitude. We have people all over the world, people who have, to get a doctorate in psychology, to get a degree, you're talking about a good 10 years of work. And then to ever get a reputation, you're talking about another lifetime. We have people all over the world now working constantly in this area, and you're just going to dismiss it by saying, well, I don't believe in it? No. But now you got a case. It's anecdotal, but that's all the ordinary mind needs. You go, wait a minute. All right, I'll tell you why I don't believe in crap like that. And let's say that you could redo my story, that you were staying around the office of a man who had just written a paper stating that he had absolute good, valid proof that all human aggression is genetically based, and he turned right around in a circumstance that he himself admitted apparently was experientially based, some life experience between him and somebody else, and he suddenly just threw it. He became a raving maniac. I thought he was going to hurt somebody. And it was within seconds after he told us about his paper. There, my friend, they would say to you, those not a follower of the system, there is why I say that psychology is not to be believed. There's always that gap. There's always that gap anytime somebody tells you definitely yes or no. That if you can ask a psychologist, is aggression genetic? Is it totally genetically based? Yes or no? I'd just like to know that. And if they'll tell you yes or no, okay, you got one situation. You go to a priest, a rabbi, any religious person, you say, all right, I want to know, is being uncharitable, if you're not charitable to your fellow man, is that evil or not? I just wonder, is that evil not to be charitable? And they go, well, yes, it is evil. Whatever they say. It is, now we're not talking about people. Now we're not talking about the priest or the psychologist. To say it's unreliable, now forget the person. You have followed a track, an ordinary track, of unreliability by letting your mind take any specific answer that apparently comes from a source, even of some authority, that says yes or no. And yet it appears that that is the whole basis, at the highest possible intellectual level, of a professional, or of someone, a student of something. What else is a man good for that holds a Nobel Prize, if they've ever given one, in psychology, if you can't ask him one simple question? In his specific field was human aggression. But he's written books like this, most of them an academic tenor of such a degree that you wouldn't possibly read it, and you finally find yourself at a cocktail party, and you go, well, I've heard all about you, and I said, tell me this. Just is human aggression, I mean, I've always been interested, but is it actually all genetic? I mean, none of it we pick up from our, our parents or things that happen to us. Is it all actually genetic? He goes, yes. Now forget him, and you go, either that or you go, I don't believe it. It doesn't matter which. As long as you will. I hate to pass up one. How do you like the one to show you how life puts out secrets? Again, I use The Secret, and with the title is Political Stability and the Secret. And I said the secret is never revealed in a land that is in a state that is too orderly or ruled by predictable authority. If it's of any interest, I was just thinking it's, Jesus, 2,500 years ago, more than that, 3,000 years ago, you had that same era generally, or even before, anyway, of Confucius and some of his ilk in the Far East, their early philosophical slice, now oftentimes mused, opined to be perhaps metaphysical in nature, but all of these apparent civil writings, the philosophical writings regarding the nature of the state by Confucius, or some of his contemporaries, there's a whole bunch of them, but at any rate, one of them was that there was a dictum, I think attributed to him, that says, leave a state that is too orderly and pursue one where disorder and disorientation reign. Mm-hmm. What in the hell can you make of that? Especially if you first read it under the context, or if you'd been there at the time, but scratch that. If you read it now, some of Confucius's musings regarding the development of a civil or civilized state for man, the raising up of enlightened rulers, the suppression of despots, and etc. You go, okay. Plus, you've always heard that Confucius on the side also said little philosophical gems that didn't have anything to do with politics. And suddenly you read, he says, abandon, desert a state that is too orderly, and seek out one ruled by disorder. All right, after my little... I have seen all sorts of interpretations of that. Especially, and I'm just using the history of literature, the more or less the way you would find it. And I'm not commenting, I'm just saying this the way that it falls, and I'll use it that way. That now, after the fact, in fact, I think they even attributed a few hundred years after, supposedly, people like Confucius said such as that, now, that almost doesn't make sense, but now I see what it is. What he meant was a wise man, that is, a man who has already seen the light regarding what should be the civilized structure of human society. A man who's already achieved that within himself, then he already lives in an orderly state. If he's been there and been able to influence his local ruler, the local king, that he's already had that kind of good influence, he's already got his local state, his local territory established and in order, and they've done away with tyranny, and there's now some justice by law. And so a wise man then would not simply stay there. He would move over to a place, an adjoining kingdom, somewhere down the road, where things are not so well established and orderly. So as they could share in his enlightenment, and he could help create a state of order there. Which fits right in with the idea of charity, fits right in with the idea that if God ever blesses you, or if you become awakened, that good Buddhist idea, long after Buddha, I might add, that the real chore of an enlightened man is not to go into the land of constant enlightenment, not to just stay in the state of bliss. No, but to give of himself and to return back to ordinary people and to help them achieve the state. It all fits with ordinary minds. Boy, is that childish. Go back. I advise you, if you'd like to, like I said, it just came to mind because I used a variation, the same kind of thing. If you notice, there's a whole series tonight of The Secret and this and that, and political stability being one of them, nationalism being one. And the kind of trick I attempt to make you play on yourself is to hear the heading, and you're supposed to know by now, that it doesn't mean rat shit about political stability, except it was nice and to the point. It sounded like it did if you just take that one item, political stability and the secret. The secret is not revealed in a state that is too orderly. So that sounds like a state, political stability, that you live in a place where there's order, predictability, and there's some kind of stable exercise of power from some ruler. It says the secret is never revealed in that state, but neither in a state that is too disorderly. But now take the whole idea that a wise man, because I don't even think Confucius bothers to put in that part. See, I'm getting too soft. I try to make some of these actually become somewhat palatable. Even if I'm misquoting him, he wishes he had said it this way. He just said, desert a state that is too orderly and flee to one wherein disorder reigns. Now, think about that. Who in the world is going to listen to that and think, wait a minute, that was supposed to have been the wisest man of his time, the intellectual beacon of the age, and he told people. I mean, his big concern, you would think, if you're ordinary and read about him, or about him, was that his main concern was in the civilizing of man. Anything else he did was just sort of an afterthought, just a byproduct of pointing out that if men did become civilized, because supposedly at that time in the life of China, they were undergoing what turned out to be hundreds, if not thousands of years of rule under bloodthirsty despots, and they were fighting for some kind of stability in little warring tribes, the same old story. And that Confucius says that his main thrust was how to bring about a civil, coherent, livable condition for the common man. And suddenly he says, flee a state that is too orderly, desert it and flee to one reigned that is ruled by disorder. You think, Jesus, the man completely lost his mind. Yeah, until you turn it all internally. And you think, if you ever want to get out of that catatonic state brought on, I was going to say by traffic, the traffic of your mind, but how about this, for those of you getting better, with the same old things that you think, your same old state of consciousness, which no matter, if you're ordinary, I know that you can still say, well, sometimes I'm not all that orderly. Yeah, you are. If you're sane, you're orderly. Your mental state is ruled by order, by a predictable exercise of authority. You know it is, or else you're not sane. It's not anything you have to speculate. People that are interested in this, I know you could say in a uselessly relative way, are a little less sane than most people to start with. But you are still sane enough that that holds true, or you wouldn't even be passing for sane. You couldn't get through the day. So you are ruled. You're living in a state, even though you can say, well, I have all kinds of internal torments and things that plague my soul in the middle of the night that you don't know about. You are still in a state. If you're sane, if you're still walking around, if you do not have men with butterfly nets hanging around alleyways just looking for you, there's not wanted posters out for you at Bellevue, in Napa Valley, Milledgeville. State mental hospitals do not have APBs out on you. Then if that's not true, then you do live in a state that is orderly and is ruled by some predictable exercise of authority. It is what seems to be your personality. It is your conception of what is reality, what is proper, and it, even though I know it seems sometimes shaky, and as I said, people who are interested in this, it's a bit less a kind of set in stone edie fix in them than it is everyone else, and yet it is still sufficient that you do not tilt at absolute useless windmills. You do not fight the unbeatable foe, at least publicly. Or if you are, you don't let anybody know about it. You're at least that sane. But what if you take the idea then that's all internal, and that you have got to be able to get away somewhere from a complete state of certainty, that you've got to be able to get somewhere that things are. Remember the way I put it to you was that the secret is never revealed in a state that is too orderly or ruled by a predictable exercise of authority, nor in one that's too disorderly. That is, you can't be nuts. You can't be coming apart like a cheap cigar from Vermont, the Cayman Islands, and Haiti. No. You can't be either one. But it would sound as though the first one would be that which would be most abhorrent to a sane mind. So wait a minute, what do you mean flee a state that is too orderly and too ruled by predictable authority? That's the very kind of place I'd want to live. I know. That's the whole general beauty of being sane and living the ordinary life of habits. That is, it's generally speaking, it's this beauty because there's this overall ease of living. There's a feeling of safety. I feel like I'm sane. I'm thinking about more or less what everybody else does, or at least enough that I can pass. And it's a feeling of familiarity. You look in the mirror in the morning, you look in the mirror of your mind, and you're never faced with, who is this mob? Who is this unruly bunch of people? It's always more or less a thing of, oh, I know him. It's good old me. If you want to be a sane, comfortable, at ease, not overtaxed, not speaking financially now, not overtaxed citizen, in other words, not much is demanded of you, you live the life of habit. Not physical habit. That's a waste of time worrying about. We've already established that. Go be a monk. The life of habit is here. That is the orderly state. It would be that from whence a mystical Confucius, if there was such a person, would have told those that were really interested, flee a state that is too orderly, that is too well disposed, too predictable. Flee it. Of course, that's the kind of statement that can really separate the wheat from the sane, the chaff from the nutzos, the Cheerios from the Fruit Loops, the mystics from the imitators, the mystics from intellectuals. Because you tell an intellectual that, and they go, oh my God, I thought these people were crazy. Flee a state that is too orderly and predictable. What the hell do they think we're working for? That's exactly what we want. We know, I know, I understand. I probably meant it metaphorically. That don't even sound metaphorical. Anyway, back to the secret. In case you think I'd change the subject. In the story that I told it tonight, when the person asked the mystic, keep in mind the story, keep in mind the psychologist, and the psychologist representing a large segment of the human population intellectually at any given time. It shifts and it goes back and forth. But a large segment of people at any particular moment will say, can be led to say, feel led to say, wait a minute, aggression is genetic. They will not use those terms. What they'll say is other people's behavior is not their fault. They're more likely to be using it if it has to do something a loved one or themselves. Or they can say, well, I read that and I believe it. Yeah. You can believe anything you want to. The mind can say, that's why I use that example of a psychologist, that his reputation is on the line. That he has research. He didn't just suddenly go, well, I believe that all human aggression is genetic. Because any good intellectual can't come up with anything anyway, you're supposed to know. Not out in the city. That's why they all stick with each other. It's just part of the herd instinct. It is part of, if you want to know the truth, it's part of the genetic wiring of those good city cigars. They hold together. So a good intellectual never just stands up and says, wait a minute. Well, say a guy's been studying all the rats and the high school students and everybody he can get his hands on, trying to consider about aggression, watching movies of lions in Africa. Been sitting there for 10 years, and he can't come up, he can't decide what his grant money is running out or whatever the reason. Anyway, an intellectual, under any circumstance, cannot suddenly go, oh, I see what's going on. It never happens. They can't do that. That's part of being an intellectual. Because to do that would break the cannibalistic food chain that keeps the intellectual world alive. So you never hear an intellectual just suddenly stand up. Or I put it to you another way, if he did, it's the international meeting of world-famous, recognized, sane, and honorable psychologists. And they're having all these is going on and on. Several days, all the important papers, people taking notes, it's being covered by obscure journals. And one of the guys up on the dais, one of the guys that they're prepared to hear one of his important papers, and they've been discussing, let's say, aggression. And it's been going back and forth, and all kinds of scientists from Russia, somebody from Pakistan comes up, there's conflicting, and suddenly this one guy stands up, a man that they all recognize. He goes, wait, in the middle of a speech, he said, it just came to me. Never mind all this, you know, no offense to you guys. It just hit me. All aggression is genetic. They would all wait, again, assuming that they recognize the man. They've been waiting to hear him speak, and he suddenly does this. The crowd would stop and be quiet. For what? But they're waiting for his proof. If he was that smart, well, anyway, then let's say he goes, wait a minute, that's it. They go, he said, no, I don't have anything else. I just realized it. And he picks up his paper that he had there to read, and he tears it up, and he says, oh, he said, I just realized it. I don't need to look at anything. I just realized it myself. All aggression, all human aggression is genetically based. A murmur would start. And if he insisted, if he'd repeat that once or twice, and especially if he tore up his paper and said, you people forget it, tear up your papers. I see it. I mean, there's not that to discuss. You do know what would happen, don't you? We are really reaching one of those areas that, you know. All right, you do know what would happen. He would end up under a doctor's, he would leave the auditorium. He would leave the conference room under medical supervision, probably under medication. Yeah. And there's no way to talk about this past a certain point, because I can say, and he's just as sane as he was to start with, which is kind of irrelevant. But what I'm saying is he did not suddenly have a small aneurysm. He did not certainly, develop a tumor. Let's say that he really, as sincerely as he can be intellectually, while sitting there he realized, my God, all human aggression is genetically based. Now, I'm still not saying it is. I'm just using that since we brought it up to start with. And he stands up and says it. Offers no proof. In fact, tears up his paper, tells the rest of them, forget that stuff. And he does it not hostilely. He does it like, I have seen the light. My years of thinking about this and being in this field finally paid off. And it wasn't this research. He takes his paper and disposed. He said, forget it. It's all genetically based. And they wait like, okay, well, tell us more. I mean, what's there more to tell? He told them what it was. They go, well, no, what's the research? What new information has come to your attention that made you believe this? And he goes, nothing. I just realized it. He will not leave there with the reputation with which he entered. The man will go out, well, people think, well, the work got him. Because there has to be, anyway. Back to my man, representing a large segment of the human population at any given time. They can say that they are convinced that one thing's true, whether it be in psychology, whether it be about aggression, whatever it is. And they can say, I believe that this is the cause of it. And if it's religious people, they say, I believe that God wants us to do this. I believe that God turned parts of the human fate over to evil forces, and I believe that's why this happens. They can say that. And ordinary people would say they're as serious as they can be. That's what I meant was the psychologist that I made up put his reputation on the line. People in the area of religion will threaten to put their life on the line. Like, I believe this, I don't care if you kill me, I believe that. They can say that, and as far as it being a stable reality in their mind, it is. But that does not stop them or anyone from the phone ringing, and they say, excuse me a second, and do something absolutely contradictory to what they said they know for a fact intellectually. Nothing funny. It is not a weakness on his part. That's being human. If you begin to see that, if you see that there is an inescapable reality at that level, which is the level at which ordinary people talk, anyone who will answer a question, and their authority, their background has nothing to do with it. Their intellectual wherewithal has nothing to do with it. But they will absolutely say, if you say, well, may I ask your opinion, or based on your expertise, is so-and-so correct? And they say yes or no. If they give you a simple yes or no. There are two things. Well, one of them, I can simply say it, and you know I'd say that they don't know. They're guessing. The world's made up of guessers and knowers. They're guessing. They got credentials. That's why they give diplomas and stuff. It's so that you can differentiate an ordinary guesser, just, your brother-in-law down at a bar, and says, well, I guess it'll rain tomorrow. I mean, anybody can say that, but then this guy walks in with a suit and tie, and he can make a guess, and it turns out he is a meteorologist. He is a weather forecaster on Channel 14. God, I recognize him. He says, well, that's the difference. Plus, he has got a degree in meteorology. Plus, our psychologist that says, well, all human aggression is based upon life experience. The other guy was wrong. It's based on life experience. You go, well, anybody could say that. It's just one or the other. I mean, you just guess. You flip a coin. What do you mean flip a coin? What do you think all this is on the wall? You think I spent 20 years in school? I'm somebody. Anyway, that's part of why you have credentials and you're a professional in life, is to separate your guesswork from just from the man in the street's guesswork. Well, hey, it's only fair. Who the hell would go and spend going to debt or end up spending several $100,000 in those number of years in schools to get a degree? Of course, I said psychology. It still staggers in theology. Somebody should check into that and just find out what it is they do for 12 years. What can you do to get a degree in theology? How can you kill 12 years? Oh, I know they can, but anyway, that's to separate the professional guessers from the amateur guessers. In the story, I'll have to pick it up again next time, but the mystic, when the person said, well, wait a minute, because they heard the story about the guy with the physique, that he attributed it to two things. His success was the good genes he inherited, which he had nothing to do with. Thanks to his parents, I got good genes, an accident. Both big boned people, good healthy people. But it was that along with my own hard work. And in the story, the original story, was pointed out, it was a shame there was not somebody else there of a particular type to interview him, to come along and go, well, may I ask you this? To what do you attribute? What is the source that motivated you to work so hard? Then, in the second telling of the story, the expanded version tonight, was then the person now asked the guy who originally told the story, who stole it from me, you find all this? He says that they thought that they got some from the story. Now, I'm not saying they didn't, but they believe they heard something. They go, well, but, now there's a tacit decision has already been made on their part that they're stating, you understand? Because I said the way I wrote it that he asked the mystic. I started to say rhetorically, but I didn't want to. But I'm just saying I started to try and give you a hint that he said to the mystic after he thought he got some out of the story. Again, I'm not being silly. When I say he thought he got some, let's assume he did, to him. And he goes, well, it would take a little while. No. He goes, well, but look, isn't everything genetic? There is a valid basis verbally on the story, in the story, for the listener to take that position. Now, I don't mean just theoretically. Somebody believes that they can see a little more than average. Go, well, all right, that story, all that does is kind of reinforce what I already suspected, or maybe what I thought I'd heard you say before, he said to the mystic. But rather than just pick out one thing, this physique and et cetera, isn't everything genetic? And the mystic said, I can't answer that. I'll give you another hint. I started to use another word instead of can't, but there is no word. The mystic said, he's saying to this guy personally, in a sometimes sincere way, not just a stranger on the street, although he just said the same thing, but he says, I can't answer that. Or if you like, I'm not going to answer that. Because it's too close to the secret itself. And that's open to some further pondering whether I mean just a matter of genetics is too close to the secret. But at any rate, that's what the guy said, and that's good enough for me for the time being since we're out of tape. But he said, that is too close, what we're talking about now, and your question is too close to the actual secret itself for me to give you, or I'm not going to give you a yes or no response. Any more than I would have if you had asked me something, if you just specific about the secret, like, wait a minute, is the whole secret the thing is that, and they just, said, is the secret that everything's genetic? And so I'm not saying it's, that you're correct or incorrect, but I'm telling you now, you're getting too close to the whole subject. I'm not going to answer yes or no. But still, you have to tell people, or you should be able to tell yourself. I'm not saying you're correct or incorrect, and I'll refer you back to one more. We got another second from last time that didn't seem to get anywhere. that said that you're not actually getting anywhere until you can verbally figure out what's going on in life to your satisfaction. I know at first it almost sounded like I either made a mistake or you didn't get the point, but it's a fact. But there's a whole bunch of unsaid conditions to that. Until you can presently, that means right this second, that's the only time it counts. If you can't think about something that you seem to have thought about before that nobody else can figure out, if you can't verbally figure it out to your satisfaction, and by figure out, it may be suddenly that you just go, wait a minute, all human aggression's genetic. Like my guy at the forum,